Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is Thursday, August 30th, 2018. And tonight's topic is the Reserve Bank of India is buying gold. That is all you need to know. Before we get to our topic, let's find out what happened in the gold and silver markets today. Gold closed down, opened at about 1203. Actually was up for a bit during the day, up to 1206, and closed at about 1199 is about where it is right now. Silver also was down, opened at about 1465, did hit 1471, and is down to about 1452 right now. So that gold-silver ratio is spreading even higher. For fans who watch that, the gold-silver ratio is about 82 to 1. Stock market fell. All three indexes, major indexes, Dow, NASDAQ, and the S&P 500 over at the cryptos. Pretty much an up and down day, but right now Bitcoin is pretty much flat over the past 24 hours at about 69.70. Bitcoin Cash down a bit, about 2% to 537. Ethereum 284, down 1.6. And Litecoin hovering around 60 and change, down less than 2%. Now, other things before we get into our topic that happened during the day. Donald Trump mentioned today in an interview with Bloomberg that he believes that the Mueller investigation is an illegal investigation. He also commented on Jeff Sessions' tenure going forward. He said that he's safe until the November elections, which probably means he'll be fired after the November elections. I don't buy into this slow walker stuff that's going on. I think Trump has had it with him. There wouldn't have been a special counsel investigating him had Sessions not recused himself. That's not to say that there's not investigations going on either at the direction of Sessions and Huber, but clearly it's not as aggressive as it could be, and also because Sessions recused himself, he's got nothing to do with what's going on, and he isn't able to rein in Sessions, and indeed Mueller, and indeed Mueller would not have been appointed if Donald Trump had a different attorney general. So I think he's about to go at the end of after the midterm elections. Also, Trump announced or is indicating that he's ready to go forward with another $200 billion in tariffs on China. Also, during his meeting with Bloomberg, he seemed to also say that Europe was as bad as China in terms of a trading partner. So we're not done yet with this whole tariff thing. We'll see how it goes. We'll be definitely following up with that in future reports. But today we're going to talk about the Reserve Bank of India is buying gold. That is all I need to know. All right, so let's talk about this latest story about India. Reserve Bank of India finally is buying gold again after a near 10-year hiatus. What I like to point out all the time is when people talk about a country's gold, they're generally referring to a central bank's gold holdings, not the gold that's in the country, not the gold that's held by citizens or funds or other entities in the country. They're only tracking the central bank's gold. Now, we know that India and China, both countries, there's estimates that there's 25,000 tons in someone's hands in those countries. In India, they think there's about 18,000 tons in private citizens' hands, and they think there's another 4,000 tons or so, excuse me, in Indian temples. However, the Reserve Bank of India right now, even with the addition of the 8 tons this year, only has about 565 tons. Now, I say only, that's a lot of gold. It's a big stack, but that puts them about 10th or 11th place in terms of central bank holdings. So the point I'm making is that central banks themselves, they don't hold the world's gold, and they don't hold 40, 50, 60% of the world's gold like they used to. A lot of it's been sold off, and if countries do hold gold, like for example China, they don't hold it all at excuse me, the central bank or the People's Bank of China. Russia's gold hoard is 2,000 tons. It's worth about $77 billion. That places it 5th in the world. So you do have decent amounts at central banks, but really it's not much to move the needle in terms of overall gold demand. However, it is important that central banks still hold gold. Just about every central bank holds gold. Of the 160 or so, nearly all of them hold it. It's interesting that Canada sold its last 2 tons of gold in 2017, but for the most part, most countries hold a certain amount of gold in reserves. But let's take a look at a few of them that are buying gold, and then a few of them that are selling gold. But again, the real takeaway from what central banks are doing with gold is whether they're net buyers or net sellers, it's more of a case-by-case basis as to which bank is buying, which bank is selling, why are they buying, why are they selling, and in what amounts. And the amounts are small this year. They're smaller this year than they were last year, but there is some buying and there is some selling. So let's look at the buyers first. So obviously the topic is about India. And again, India adding 8 tons of gold to its reserves. Not very significant, but it's indicative that they're adding it back. Now, in 2009, India added 200 tons of gold that they bought from the IMF. And that pretty much replaced about the 80 tons of gold that they had loaned back in 1991 when their balance of payments were screwed up. So I think they loaned some to the Bank of England and some to the Bank of Switzerland to raise money to sort out their balance of payment issues. So gold is a very helpful asset for countries to hold. So for example, if India didn't have, the countries would not take their rupee, or they didn't have treasuries, or for whatever reason, in order to buttress up your financial position, if you have gold, that's always going to be universal. And indeed, gold is better than the US dollar and the US Treasury. Even Alan Greenspan said that. Gold is more universal than the US dollar. Why? Because the US dollar, while it's liquid, still has to travel on the SWIFT system, still has issues with, some people are concerned about holding US Treasuries. You know, they say they can always print the money to pay them, but gold, there's no question as to its stability, and it will universally be accepted as collateral. So in any event, India added back 200 tons in 2009 and then didn't do anything. They didn't add any gold for the longest time. And one of the reasons they don't add gold is they don't want to add to the already balance of payments deficit that they often have, because their citizens are importing a real large amount of gold. We saw last year how India imported 900 tons of gold. And if you value all that out, sometimes gold imports account for 10, 15, up to 20% of India's overall imports. So I guess the Indian government doesn't want to be adding to that issue by buying gold itself. And also all these central banks, probably other than Russia, they're all part of the fiat currency game. They're all part of the IMF. Russia's part of it too, but they're all part of the IMF, and they really don't want to rock the boat with gold. They want to have some for their protection, but by the same token, they don't want to undermine the entire fiat system, because they're all in on it. They all want to print money. They all want to issue debt. They don't want to go to any type of gold base currency, but they want to somewhat hedge their bets against falling fiat currencies, falling dollar, falling whatever currency it may be. So it is prudent for central banks, but they don't go all in. Now, Russia is probably the only bank that's going all in, because their economy is not really connected to the U.S. economy. They don't do trade with the U.S. They're kicked out of the SWIFT system every now and then. They have sanctions against them. So they actually behave in a different way. But for the rest of the countries, China, India, the BRICS, or whoever, even the countries that want to de-dollarize, they really can't, because their economies are based on dollars. They borrow in dollars. Russia's an exception. Russia's on its own, and Russia manages its central bank in a different way than the other central banks. And Russia has the advantage of having decent second or third world's largest gold mining production. So clearly they've been adding gold. Now let's take a look at who else is adding gold in the world of central banks. We talk about this one, Kazakhstan. The Central Bank of Kazakhstan has been adding gold to reserves for almost 70 months now in a row. They added 40 tons of gold in 2017 and over 20 tons in 2018 so far. So they'll probably add another 40. And that's part and parcel of the Central Bank of Kazakhstan mining back in 2002 only 15, 20 tons of gold a year. And now they're mining close to 100 tons a year. And they're converting a lot of that gold into their reserves, doing something similar to what Russia is doing. They've got a weak currency. They've got decent gold mining and increasing gold mining. So they convert more of their currency into gold as opposed to trying to take their currency and buying treasuries with it. I mean, it makes total sense to buy gold over the treasury, especially if you can get a discount from your miners at home. Maybe they charge you the cost of production. I don't know the deal that they have with their miners, but even if they pay full freight, still, it's a good deal with a depreciating currency to be buying a certain amount, dollar cost averaging in each and every month. Now, Kazakhstan has 43%, 44% of their overall reserves in gold. That'll probably get to 50%. So very prudent move on their part. Russia has been adding gold every year since 2006. They added 224 tons last year. And they added about 130 tons so far this year. They'll probably do about the same this year as last year. Another one is Turkey. Now, Turkey sold gold in 2015, sold gold in 2016. They sold about 14 tons in 2015, 139 tons in 2016. But last year, they added 188 tons, basically bought back what they sold in 15 and 16. But this year, they've added only about 20 tons so far. And then the other bank that's buying is the little tiny Kyrgyz Republic. Their central banker, the guy who runs the central bank, is a big fan of gold. He wants every citizen to own an ounce or two. They've been adding gold in 2012, but small amounts, 0.4 tons, 0.6 tons, 0.3 tons, 0.3 tons, 0.4 tons, between 2012 and 2016. However, last year they stepped it up to 2.4 tons and 1.6 tons so far this year. So the Kyrgyz Republic is really looking to make a splash, at least on a percentage basis of their, and they also have a bit of a gold mining production in the Kyrgyz Republic. So this year, the central banks are buying gold. Yeah, the ones that are buying this year are buying in overall less because while Russia's buying about the same as it did last year, so they'll probably buy about 220 tons. Kazakhstan will probably buy its 40 tons or more this year, but Turkey is off to only probably buy, because they don't have any money to buy gold now, so they're not going to buy much gold. They might end up with 30 tons. So, and then the Kyrgyz Republic might add 3 tons. So if you add up with, you're going to get less than 300 tons purchased by Turkey, Russia, Kazakhstan, and the Kyrgyz Republic. Now let's look at who's selling. Now this is interesting. The Czech Republic sells every year. They sell a little amount. They've been selling ever since, it goes way back to 2004. They don't sell much, and they don't have much, but they have been selling, as has been Belarus. They've been selling every year, small amounts, since 2000 and, well, actually, they sold 12 tons in 2010, not 10 tons in 2009. No, I'm sorry, I'm doing it backwards. They sold in 2014 and 2015 small amounts. They bought a decent amount in 2009 and 10. They bought small amounts in 2016 and 17, and they haven't bought anything this year. So they're not a player one way or the other right now in terms of buying and selling. Germany, I did a report on this. It was published in Zero Hedge. People didn't know this, but Germany has been selling gold for the longest time. The article in Zero Hedge was, let's see if I can find it for you. Let's see, it's Germany selling gold, Zero Hedge. I think it was called Who Knew. And when I saw that, when I was doing my research, I saw they've been selling 4, 5, 6 tons of gold every year, and I was wondering what was going on there, because Germany is the #2 gold holding nation. They made such a big deal out of wanting to repatriate their gold, and then I looked at it, I said, well, why are they selling their gold if they're such big fans of gold? Well, as it turned out, they've sold about 85 to 100 tons. Here it is. I'll give you the link here. Over the last 10, 15 years. And I finally found the footnote in their annual reports, the Bundesbank. And apparently they sell it because they're selling it to the government so they can mint gold coins. Now, I found that odd that their own mint, I guess it's part of the treasury, why they can't source their own additional gold, why they have to buy it from the central bank, which means, here's the link, that the central bank has been hemorrhaging a certain amount of gold for the longest time. And it's not that they're in any danger of, there's the Zero Hedge article, it's not that they're in any danger of running out of gold, but still there's a steady hemorrhaging of gold. You can check out that article and you can see every year for the past 15 or so years, and it's consistent. So back in 2002, 10 tons, 2003, 6 tons, 2004, 6 tons. It goes on and on, between 6 and 10 tons, and they just keep dumping it out, and it doesn't look like they're planning on stopping it. That's how they mint their coins, is by buying their gold from the German Bundesbank, and they don't seem to be too concerned about losing 100 tons every 10, 15 years. I would think they would buy it on the open market and make the coins from it, but I guess there's probably some cost savings that Germany's probably booking that as a profit because they bought this gold a long, long time ago. But the key is, all these European nations that claim to have big gold positions, you don't see them buying it. You don't see Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands. Now you say, well, they're part of the EU, but the EU is not buying gold either. In fact, within the EU, there's gold sales throughout. All right, who else is involved in selling gold? Let's see, get back to the blog post for tomorrow where I put all this stuff for you guys. All right, who's selling? Mexico. Mexico has been selling every year since 2013. So Mexico is a gold producer. Everyone knows them as a silver producer, but they have a fairly substantial gold mining production, and they have been selling ever since 2013. 1.4, not a lot, but 1.4 tons in 2013, 0.4 in 2014, 1.3, 1 in 2015 and 2016, 0.2 and 0.1 this year. So, you know, they've sold, let's say, 4 or 5 tons this year. Germany will sell about 5 tons this year. Czech Republic might sell a ton. Australia, another one. They've sold 4.1 tons so far this year. Last year they didn't sell any, but 2016, 5 tons, 2015, a couple of tons. But the biggest seller of gold over the last 4 years has been, and I'm going to go look at the comments now and see who knows who has been the biggest seller of gold. Let's see if we can get an answer here. Anyone know who sells the most gold over the past few years? All right, we don't have an answer, and I will tell you. The country, drum roll please, that has sold the most gold since 2014 and has sold a whopping 217 tons. Venezuela. Venezuela had to sell its gold, unfortunately. They sold 6.6 tons in 2014, 88 tons in 2015, 86 tons in 2016, 25 tons in 2017, and only 12 tons this year, and that's because they're running out of gold. So having gold is definitely an important thing, and it did help Argentina, but you learn the old lesson. You can never have enough gold, and obviously, even though Venezuela at one point was in the top 15, 16 gold holding nations, they're not any longer because they had their financial issues and the gold helped them for a few years, but they didn't help themselves and get out of their problems because they're continuing to run their socialist economy into the ground. The gold did help them for a short period of time, but no longer. All right, so that's the lay of the land. So basically, this year, central banks will net buy between 250 and 300 tons of gold. That's out of a 4,200 ton demand, out of a 3,500 ton, that includes scrap, but a 3,500 ton gold mining production. So central banks are not big players in the gold market. When people say central banks are buying gold, that is all I need to know. Now you know enough, but really you don't know anything because what I just gave you is insignificant data. The only thing that's significant is that central banks in general still hold gold. There's rationales to hold gold, but the movement in the gold, the additions and subtractions really are tiny. I think what's more significant is which countries are buying, and even then it's not that important. It's just that you can see the fact that they repatriate it, they still value it. They don't get rid of it. They don't just say, well, what's the point? We'll just go full on fiat. Now, the problem I have with what their gold holdings are, they might as well sell it because they don't have enough. And it's almost like they know they should have more, but they know that if they had more, they've kind of agreed to support the fiat system. So they're all reluctant, it seems, other than Russia, to really make a big splash. And China, I think, is not reluctant to buy it, but reluctant to disclose it because that's why they don't put it on the central bank, the People's Bank of China. I don't think they're lying about it. I think they just don't hold it at the People's Bank of China. And since they're a communist country, anything that's in the country belongs to them anyway. Now, India is different. Their reserve bank only holds 565 tons now, but there's a lot of gold in the country. But India doesn't own that gold, and that's why they have that program where they try to get the gold back from the people through this gold monetization program, and the Indians aren't turning it in. They're not buying it. So, all right, well, let's take a look at our comments for the evening. Let's see what we got here. Let me close out some windows. All right, what do we got? First, okay, DW Smaulgld. I have a question. If there's no manipulation of gold and silver prices, why are they the only asset in a long-term secular bear market? That's a tough question to answer because it contains two assumptions. If there was the answer could be, you could turn that into a statement. Gold and silver prices are manipulated and therefore they're in a bear market. That's one way you can analyze the data that we have. You can say, okay, all assets have risen, and therefore, why haven't gold and silver risen? Must be because of manipulation. That's one theory. Another theory is all assets are risk assets that have risen, and because gold and silver are assets that people want to have when they're not gambling with their money, and therefore that's why they've gone down. So one can explain gold prices both in terms of manipulation and also just generally in markets. And my answer would be it's probably a combination of the two. So for example, if you just take a look at the gold price from 2008 to 2011, gold rose during that period. Why? People were panicked about the health of the financial system. Just been through the financial crisis. They didn't trust the Fed's money printing, QEs, so they thought best thing to do is not be in the stock market, not to buy housing, to go into gold. And that's what they did, and the price rose. That's not to say that when it was rising, they weren't trying to suppress it. It's just that the markets were still thinking it makes sense to not be buying speculative assets. as the Fed went along, by the time they did their QE3, they finally managed to convince the markets, the real estate markets and the stock markets, it's time to stop being cautious and to start throwing money at Netflix, Amazon, Fangs, Tesla, that stuff. And it's time to start buying houses again. And that's what they did. And at the same time, that's when gold and silver went down. Now, you can point to meetings where all of a sudden the price goes down. You can point to the short selling, naked shorts. Sure. But again, I think it happened at a period of time when the markets were destined also to head downward. So I think what they can do when they manipulate, I think they manipulate each and every day, but it depends on where the general sentiment is. And I think it's easier to manipulate it down when sentiment for safety assets like gold and silver are down. And I think that's probably what's happened. Investment assets, property, equity have made huge moves over the last decade, and non-investment assets made similar move. Classic cars, art. Occam's razor says PM should be sharing the trends, one or the both of the previously mentioned asset classes, barring intervention or agenda. Well, not necessarily, because gold and silver are safety assets. They're not speculative assets. And I would say the last 5 years, we have been in a very, very speculative environment. So if you can buy a stock that doesn't make any money and goes up because the chart looks good, or you can buy cryptocurrency just because they go up, why would you invest in a solid asset? I'm asking rhetorically. I know why you would. But I think that's the reason, in general, the direction of gold and silver are down, because people don't see the risk. People see, and if they do see the risk, they see the opportunity cost is not great enough to pour into it, because they think there's still room to run on Tesla and all the other nonsense. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't believe this concept that people aren't buying gold anymore because they don't view it as a safe haven and they're buying cryptos instead. I don't think that's the case. No one's buying cryptos right now. Cryptos are depressed. People aren't buying gold and silver right now because they don't have that fear, and we don't have the rising wealth that would make gold rise and silver to a certain extent any more demand than it already has in India and China. So the physical demand for gold and silver is driven mostly from jewelry and then investment. Investment is a fear trade. Investment is a risk-off trade. Well, we don't have that right now. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we don't. And we're not seeing big boosts in incomes in India and China, and Americans aren't buying gold. So that does explain it. And when there's tepid demand and tepid sentiment, then you can manipulate it lower. Good day, mate. All right, Jeffrey Gotts, what happened? I don't know. What'd you miss? Ed Mall, what's the news, people? Ed Mall, they hold gold because it's worthless. No, actually, they don't hold silver, the central banks, but they do hold gold, and we had a long discussion on it, so you probably heard it. There's no point in repeating it. All right. Consonant, yay, made it to the live show. Good to have you with us tonight. Hubzilla, 8 tons would hurt if it dropped on your toe. Yeah, I'd gladly have that drop, though. I don't think I would. There's certain things, very few things I'll do just for money. I don't think I'd allow someone to drop 8 tons of gold on my foot. You'd probably lose your foot, and some people might be willing to lose their foot to have 8 tons of gold dropped on it, but yes, that would indeed hurt. Annabelle, on a totally unhelpful tangent, the Indian flag is very stylish and distinguished. Yeah, it is. I don't know the history behind it. Maybe some of our Indian friends could tell us. I mean, there's 3 colors, and I don't know what that thing is in the middle there, but it's a nice looking flag. Shark Air, live broadcast never works for me. I'll check you out later. All right, good night. That's because Shark Air is in the Netherlands, and he could not stay up after a long day. He is an engraver, and it must be difficult on the eyes. All right. Cosinart, the Comex. I don't know what that means. Maybe you can fill me in, and I'll try to answer whatever that means. Humanity is enslaved by maritime admiralty law. That's an interesting concept. I don't know much about it, but I do know when you go on a cruise ship, you can get killed on a cruise ship, and they'll say, oh, We don't have any jurisdiction. And happens all the time. They do a lot of murders on cruise ships. They throw them off the boat, and then they pull into a port, and they say, oh, we can't help you. They just hold the barbarous relic for tradition. Well, that's what Ben Bernanke said when Ron Paul asked him if gold was money. But I think he also said that, I don't think he said treasuries were money either, because they're not. My view on gold being held by central banks is they don't hold them for tradition. That's just stupidity. They hold them as a valuable asset. They don't hold them so they can trade them. They hold them, like, for example, why Venezuela held it. When it's the rainy day fund. You can always sell gold and always get money for it. Money meaning whatever the value is that you need to pay off your debt or whatever you need to raise funds for. So they don't hold it for tradition. They hold it for insurance. They hold it for security. They hold it for a hedge against, and he did say this, tail risk, bad. But he was saying people hold it for tail risk and bad outcomes. And he's right about that. That's why you hold it. And that's one of the reasons that gold is down now and silver is down, is that the overall sentiment is they're not worried about it. And I think the issue with the gold community is that we think everything is always, doom is always around the corner. There's too much debt and it's just going to blow. And it doesn't matter until it does. Well, that's true. But that's like knowing there's going to be a hurricane. You don't know when it's going to be. Yeah, it makes sense to be prepared for it. But in financial markets, sometimes being prepared for something for 9 years doesn't pay off. That's the opportunity cost. There's people out there that are trading in and out of Teslas and all these stocks that have gone up 10-fold. They're trading in and out of speculative assets, real estate flippers, cryptocurrencies, ICOs, all that stuff. And if they're smart, they may be hedged with gold. But I think a lot of people that are trading gold and silver or stack gold and silver, that's all they do. And they just figure better to be early than late. And you could be sitting on a stack, though, for 10, 15 years. So I think the reasoning behind both sides is sound. I think there's probably something you do in between, which is use the gold and the silver as a hedge, and then play life as it comes in the riskier stuff. But to each his own. I mean, I'm not one to talk. I'm not invested in stock markets and in buying and trading and doing that kind of stuff. Heightzilla, I think most countries treat gold like a sleeping dog. Just let it lie. If it awakens, it could bite. That's another way of looking at it. Anita A. Sorry, missed the show. Just got here 8:30. Good to have you here. We're pretty much wrapping up, but you can always go back and catch the beginning of the show. We were talking about you. No, we weren't. Scared Turtle. Sun Tzu spent a lot of time in India, which explains the gold purchases. True story. Now, for those of you who know, that's somewhat of an inside joke, because I'm always talking about, the gold crowd likes to talk about China's this and China's that, and they are smart, they like gold, they read Sun Tzu, and everything Sun Tzu's doing is... But I didn't know that Sun Tzu, his role in uniting India and defeating Alexander. I got to read up on Sun Tzu. See, everybody, what they know about Sun Tzu is the art of war. But they don't know about the life of Sun Tzu. They just read these little pithy aphoristic utterances, and that's all they know. That is all you need to know. All right, well, I think that's all you need to know from me tonight. Unless you got any other questions, I'm going to sign off. Don't forget to buy your Smaulgld mugs. I'm going to make another mug run tomorrow. I'll leave you the link. Just go to the Smaulgld website. The two mugs that I ship out are the classic and the super classic mugs. I do that with free shipping. The cost is subsumed in the shipping, but I don't feel like calculating the different shipping for different parts of the country. Actually, I lose money on them, but that's all right. But that's the Smaulgld Classic and the Super Classic. I ship those out with a personal note. The Smaulgld travel mug and to go, you have to order from the manufacturer, and that you can order. I'll give you the link to that at the Smaulgld store. There's also a cute little espresso mug, Smaulgld espresso mug, and other Smaulgld related products. And if you just want to help me out and become a Smaulgld patron, I think I got 13 very generous monthly patrons. You can do that. And if you're interested in sending a donation via PayPal or Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Ethereum, they're all coming your way, and I do appreciate that. I had to spend $1,100 on hosting with GoDaddy just for 3 years. It is expensive. And you know, even GoDaddy, they could, they don't like your content. They haven't done this yet to anybody, I don't think. They haven't censored people, but you're more likely to be censored for sure off of YouTube, more likely to be censored on Facebook, on Twitter, but even your own website. They could, I think the new way is going to be self-hosting or these types of decentralized hostings like Made Safe, and a lot of these companies like a BitTube, where you're not really hosted by any one central server. And I think that finally is when people will have free speech. And in a sense, it's censorship free. And it's the same with money. Decentralized money is gold, silver, and some cryptocurrencies, because you don't need permission to get on to have them. Now, they can be confiscated in the case of gold and silver, and in the case of cryptocurrencies, you're restricted to your ability to get online, to have a device, and so on. But at least they don't require a central point. There is no Mr. Bitcoin Corporation. There is no Gold Incorporated or Silver LLC that you have to get permission from to get it. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening tonight, and we'll be back again tomorrow. We do this every night, Monday through Friday, 8 o'clock. And also go check out the BitChute channel, the Smaulgld BitChute channel. Also Smaulgld on minds.com, gab.ai. It's best to probably have an account on all of these different social media platforms. You never know what's going to happen to this. Oh, one other thing I saw today was not widely reported. This is very, very, very interesting. Wealth Watchman sent me this. And the reason, I guess, you probably haven't heard this is because it was from a CNN reporter. But apparently, he ran into Steve Bannon last night, or 2 nights ago, and he asked him a question about this censorship stuff. And Bannon said that the government should take over. This is unbelievable. He said the government should take over Facebook, Twitter, Google, all these companies. And then he said what they should do is they should seize the companies and then seize the data of those companies and put them into trust. Now, this, of course, would just be... Now, it's interesting because the reason it's interesting that... what's the word? That this is being reported is